Sometimes the hardest truth to hear is the one about yourself.
I was maybe in my early 20s, and the therapist said to me that maybe the problem wasn't the people around me, it was my expectation of them. Which was
You got to sit on that for a minute.
a fair thing to unpack. Unfortunately, when I was 22, my response was go F yourself, and I got up and walked out.
This week, we're speaking with Allie Copeland. Allie is the Chief Commercial Officer at ADI Global Distribution, a company that supplies security and smart building technology to businesses around the world. She spent nearly a decade at ADI, taking on some of the company's biggest leadership roles, from running global and North America operations to serving as CTO and COO. Outside of that work, she's also passionate about supporting young people aging out of foster care, helping them gain real-world experience and a path into the workforce. But the way she leads today was shaped long before her career began, in a chapter of her life that started in her teens.
It's only been probably in the last 5 years that I've even been comfortable saying that out loud, because I felt judged a lot of times.
This is Ordinary Greatness. It's a show about real people who achieved great things and the lessons they learned along the way. Whether you were just getting started on your career journey, considering a change, interested in hearing stories of leaders who have made it, this is a show for you.
So, you took on a lot of responsibility pretty early in life relative to others. So maybe take us back. Tell us what, your teen years were like.
So I was a teen mom. I was pregnant at 16. I had my daughter at 17 years old. I actually graduated high school at 16. And really, kind of was a little bit lost in a lot of ways. But I was extremely fortunate that my daughter came into my life. I think she gave me a lot of purpose and a lot of drive to do something better for us and to have a better way. So I went to college. I went to Penn State. I tell people I never went to a football game because I had a baby, and you have to pay for diapers, and you can't afford a student pass and things like that. So I went through college, and then her and I packed up in a Hyundai that was not a great car. Hyundais are good cars now, I will say, and they have that great 10-year warranty. When I had one, it was not so great a car, and it liked to overheat. And it was me, her, that Hyundai, a 13-inch television, and $500. And we left Philadelphia, and we were looking for something better, and we were looking for a future, and we found it in Dallas, Texas. And that was how I ended up in Dallas, and that was how I started a career in wholesale when I got down here. It was my first job.
Amazing. You say all that like it was easy. I know it could not have been. Like, were you scared? Like,
Oh
what was
man,
it?
It was easy, and I think now, and I think about the fact that I have a mortgage and I have all these dogs, and like, when else in my life could I have picked up and said, we need a fresh start, and we're gonna do better by taking this fresh start. And that was probably the only time in my life that I could have done that. And so, if anything, it probably says I'm a little bit of a risk taker, but I think it was a calculated risk, because in my mind I thought, well, you can always go back home, right? You can always turn around and go back. And if this doesn't work out, there's what's the worst that can happen kind of a thing.
In the early days, I think people make a lot of assumptions, right? And did you encounter some of that? How'd you react to it? How'd you manage that?
Yeah, I will say it's only been probably in the last 5 years that I've even been comfortable saying that out loud. Because I felt judged a lot of times. And I remember people would feel very comfortable. I'd be at the grocery store, 17 with a baby, and people didn't hesitate to tell you what they thought about that sometimes, that you were too young to be a parent, or just judgment overall. And so I think it created a sense of shame sometimes, or, this is something that I shouldn't talk about or that I shouldn't bring up. But then, I realized, I worked really hard for myself and my daughter, and maybe there's other people out there that need to hear, you hear so much negativity, maybe you need to hear somebody positive that's saying one experience maybe that wasn't on the plan doesn't have to derail your plans in life, or doesn't have to, you can still accomplish all the things that you want to accomplish and do the things you want. Might it be a little bit harder? Yeah. But I also think there were advantages it gave me. It calmed me down. It gave me a maturity at a younger age that, if you put me with a 17-year-old, other 17-year-olds might not have had that maturity. So I think there were also advantages.
Did you recognize it once you got into the working world? Was that noticeable to you how differently your mindset was versus theirs?
Absolutely, right? Because I mean, you're responsible for a life, and you're responsible for, you put myself against somebody 21 working in a wholesaler. I've got daycare, I've got an education for her that I'm trying to save for. I've got goals that other maybe 20 and 21-year-olds didn't have. So it definitely maybe changed my perspective about a lot of things. And again, I think it kept me calm and it grounded me younger than I would have been if I had been kind of a quote unquote normal 20-year-old living the traditional college life. I definitely had to mature quicker, grow quicker, make trade-off decisions quicker. And, all those things came into the workplace. I didn't maybe realize it at the time, but they absolutely came into the workplace. I tell people one of my favorite stories is a single mom's checkbook is the best lesson in working capital, right? Because you learn how to manage cash flow and you learn how to do things. Now, if you would have asked me when I was 21, if I knew what working capital was, I would have said absolutely not. But at the time when I was working in a wholesale distributor, I was learning how to pay the bills and manage their cash flow. And we were able to invest in additional space and additional people because of those things. And then, when I looked back on it 20 years later, I went, well, hell, I was just managing their working capital, but I was doing it from the lens of a single mom's checkbook.
Oh my gosh. That's the thing of the past, right? Nobody's the generation and two below. Nobody's ever going to actually write those things out in their checkbook anymore.
Yeah,
Right?
did I say check? Yeah, I also double space after periods, which I was told.
Me too.
Yeah, I was told is a dead giveaway that that you're of a certain you are from the 1900s.
I feel like my freshman college English teacher would just pop out of somewhere and hit me over the head if I didn't. But
I can't do it. They're like, don't do that. Just one space, And I'm like, I just can't. It's double space. It's double space.
How did that experience with your daughter and having so much responsibility inform you, like when you got into early leadership roles?
It's funny because sometimes people say that I have mom energy a lot of times in how I approach things.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say it probably at a young age, I kind of exuded a little bit of mom energy. I want to take care of my teams. I want my teams to feel heard. I want everyone to feel like they have a voice. And I also want to value a lot of diversity in the team. I remember we did an exercise with my operations team a couple of years ago that was really cool, where we did our Myers-Briggs profiles. And we shared them more to say diversity of thought is an important element of diversity. Yeah. And, if everybody's an INTJ or everybody's, an ESFJ or whatever, everybody's probably thinking the same. So it's really important to respect diversity of team and look for different ways to let every voice be heard. And some of that's being a mom, right? Because all your children have different personalities and there's different ways. Sometimes you have to motivate them. And so I think the same, people are people, right? Humans are humans regardless. So honoring, leaning into the natural talents that people have or the natural ways and the things that your kids enjoy taught me you just do the same with people you work with and with your teams, and they'll go far. They'll go really far for you.
Yeah, I wonder if you're an E or an I.
I'm an I.
No.
Believe it
or not.
You must
be the softest of eyes.
I can put myself out there, but I joke it's called turtle time. I need to then retreat to my shell and read a book and restore.
Get energy. Yeah.
Yes, I re-energize through the eye.
Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, there are many different ways to lead. One philosophy you may have heard of is called servant leadership, a term coined by former AT&T executive Robert K. Greenleaf. That mindset comes through in how Allie talks about her team. She believes every employee is the expert in their own role, and that leaders shouldn't just give direction. They should be ready to roll up their sleeves and work alongside the team.
I consider myself, in the traditional text, I'd say I'm a servant leader. Or it's the one I probably resonate with the most. I think you get to a certain level as a leader, probably director level and higher, where your job isn't to, your job is to set the strategy and remove obstacles for the folks downstream towards the field. So I think for me, it was a kind of a natural progression. It was easier for me to start to move into those roles because I believe my job is just to help with, we all have a role to play on the field, right? My job might be the head coach in my team, But I respect kind of I respect every single person in every single role because we all have a role to play. And as long as we assume best intent and look at each other that way and respect one another's role. Like, yeah, the quarterback's really cool, but we all can't be the quarterback, right? But the quarterback's not really cool if the O-line's not doing what they're supposed to be doing. He's on the ground and he's not so great anymore. So, I think my style is really understand what everyone's role is in the game and respect their role. Even though some people maybe get a little bit more accolades at the press conference.
What was the hardest thing for you to remove yourself from? Like, I think of, same, you get along in your career. There were things that you were really good at once upon a time, and maybe still like, oh boy, nobody was ever a better researcher than I. What's the thing that like, oh boy, that's tough to give up because I was pretty good at that?
I don't think I'll ever give it up because it's part of our culture, which is just the legacy of like, I call it go to ground or Gemba. Right? Like when there's something wrong in the business, go to where it happens. And, and people will say, oh, well, you get to a point, you're too high up to do that. There's people that should be doing that. And I actually challenge that line of thought that you should never be too high up to go to there was a whole television series about it, right? Wasn't it? Where the bosses went and they wore like
undercover boss.
Undercover, right? There was a whole series about that. And you find out what's really going on in your company. I have two philosophies. One is the best ideas come from the field. They don't come from, probably an executive looking at an Excel spreadsheet. They actually come from engaging with the people who interact with the customers every day and who are doing the lifting every day. That's where the best ideas come from. So as a leader, you never want to get too removed from it. You should often go to the field, see what's going on, talk to the customers, talk to the people that are doing things every day, and just be part of that.
What were maybe one or two of the tougher moments where things happened in your career where that mentality of like putting on a smile and getting after it was really tough?
Oh gosh. Well, we just went through an ERP conversion about a year ago. So, so some people, might know that I chopped all my hair off. So my joke was we went through an ERP, breakup and I cut my hair. At least I didn't get bangs has been my joke.
Bangs could have been the natural conclusion.
Bangs could have happened from the ERP conversion. That was a tough one, right? Just keeping a smile on your face because it was 110 stores plus all of our distribution centers. We did a big bang for the Americas.
Yeah.
So everybody went live on the same Monday morning, every single process, every single function. We didn't, we had done a small regional deploy in Canada. And then we talked about doing regional deploys, but it was just going to kind of extend this out for 2 years. We don't really operate as a regional distributor. Part of our benefit was being national. So we were going to have all this throwaway code to kind of create a Frankenstein regional system. And we finally just said, you know what, let's just do it. Let's just rip the Band-Aid and go. So there were, as you can imagine, some really long nights after that. There were some days that were really tough, trying to be positive and being the face of kind of the ERP project. When everyone's in that natural trough of despair that happens with the, you can tell people all day long.
They create those charts for a reason.
Yeah, here's what's going to happen. But until you're in it and you're actually feeling it, I don't think people realize the reality of just how bleak it can seem this, during hypercare. So there were nights where, but I still would have a smile on my face and I would joke, trauma bonding is still bonding. Like even though we're bonding through trauma, we're still bonding together, and we'll be stronger because of that when we get out on the other side.
What about, and this has been a problem for me, not a lot of women in your industry and our industry. So just curious, a little bit about that experience and how do you see that? Is that changing?
I definitely think it's changing. So, when I think back 20 years ago, it wasn't uncommon to be the only person sitting in the room that was a woman.
It must have always been.
Not anymore. I think there's a lot more women that are in distribution. Mm-hmm. We recently had our sales kickoff meeting, and I'm going to say very confidently, 50% of the winners that were on stage that received awards were women. It was as many women as there were men up on stage.
Great.
So I think we've come a lot further than 20 years ago in terms of diversity there. But what I will tell you is, and this may make some people uncomfortable, we have a lot more to go because diversity, we still have a lot of white people in our industry. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an opportunity that we need to explore why that is.
In.
Yeah, I think there's still, I don't think it's women anymore. I think we've made strides, but I also think now it's our obligation to look in the room and say, okay, who else's voice
Mhm.
maybe isn't as amplified as it can be, and can we help amplify it? And
Sure.
now we need to lift them up the way others in our careers helped lifted us.
When we talk about careers on this show, we often hear about big pivots and nonlinear careers. That's the idea that most of us will change industries or even professions several times over the course of our lives. But many people with incredible and meaningful careers follow a different path. Allie built her career in wholesale distribution, and she stayed. Not because she never explored other options, but because she found something there that kept pulling her back.
You've mentioned a couple of times really feeling a part of the wholesale industry and that being important to you. I mean, did you ever think about getting out? Like, I mean, or just why does it connect with you so much?
I remember there was one point where I always thought I'd be a lawyer, like when I was a kid, if you had asked me, right?
It's just because you're supposed to be, right?
Yeah. I thought I'd really enjoy, you read a lot and you research and you come up with arguments. And I was like, oh, I'd love this. And there was a point where I remember saying to my husband, like, do I go back to school and try to get a law degree? And he goes, to what end?
Yeah.
Rightfully so. Like
Good
what
question.
are you trying to accomplish? And I was like, I don't know. Right. Well, just because I think I'd be interested in that. And he goes, well, are you not interested in what you're doing right now? And I was like, no, I love what I'm doing right now. Okay. So then why change it? So that was probably the one time in my career where I thought about like, do I, and it was later in at that point where it was kind of like, yeah, like the time is running out.
It would have been a big,
if I'm going to do it. And he was supportive if I wanted to, but I thought it was a great question, was like, to what end? Like, what purpose do you feel like you're missing, that you feel like that's where to go? And I was like, no, I mean, I get up every day. I'm energized. I like solving problems. I think I like the blue collar nature of a lot of our customers in wholesale, because I think that resonates with a lot of how I grew up, and, that people aren't so posh. I think I like that. So I like our customer base. I like solving problems. And I think that's what distribution is, right? It was spurned out of the Industrial Revolution, where, you had to solve a problem and you had to be creative. And I think that problem solvers and creative thinkers find their way into wholesale. And, and that's why we've thrived as long as we have.
It's the most people-centric industry. And it's one of the reasons why I love it.
Yeah.
Early in my career, I worked in a little bit of healthcare, a little bit of tech. You get some exposure to some different things. And all of that is interesting. But the people in this business, it's the best.
Yeah. I mean, it's, there are some days where you're just like, okay, what rock did you crawl out from? But but by and large, again, because I think it's like such a small industry of community, I think the people that love it, they stay. And I also love that you don't necessarily have to have a perfect background to be in distribution, right? Like the Dick Watermans of the world that became CEO and didn't go to college. The Allie Copelands that had a baby at 16. And like, I think in wholesale distribution, we embrace the imperfect a little bit, and create a sense of you're welcome here, even if you maybe don't fit this traditional mold. And I think that's what attracts people to it. And I think that's what keeps us here.
Yeah, I love that. It's great that you had a good partner kind of check your thinking about the whole law school thing.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting topic. When do you know to just be happy doing what you're doing and live within that and focus on what you're doing?
I don't know. I think it's hard for me to answer that. There's a book I'm reading right now, and it's Oprah and Brooks wrote it together. Arthur Brooks, who wrote From Strength to Strength, and it's about being happy. My husband and I, we like to read books together. Like we'll read a chapter a day together and then talk about it. So we're reading that one, and a lot of like what's in it about being happy. Like I feel like I just naturally, like I already do that. So he's getting some findings, and so I think for me it was just, like I didn't have the best childhood growing up. I had a lot of background there and a lot of trauma that I had to work through from growing up. And so I think I just look at the bright side of things, because I'd rather my headspace be there than, any of us can dwell in the negative and can point to that and say, well, that's why I'm this way or that, but okay, again, to what end? Like to what purpose? And, I think there was a concerted time, and I did a lot of therapy, in my 20s to get there. There was a point where it was like, I can't control everybody else, but I can control my reaction to things, and I can control how I choose to move forward from things. And that was very just empowering and liberating to me. Like, I don't have to choose to have hate in my heart or
Mhm.
anger at situation, right? Like I can choose the energy that I respond to things with and that I put out in the world. And that was like just one of my most probably empowering therapy sessions. Like the therapist, I know this is a podcast, so if you're listening, you wouldn't be able to see it. But I remember him saying, he used his hands and he said, if somebody goes here, right, like ups the ante in a situation, you don't have to
Yeah.
like meet the ante with them. Like you can just choose to say, no, I'm going to exit myself from this situation and I'm going to move on. And, because that's what's best for me. And I remember that just being really powerful. And it made me think to myself, that was where they're like, okay, so if the situation's not healthy or I'm not happy, I'm going to go find a situation where I am healthy and happy.
Yeah. It's great that you found that resource. It's kind of, we're a similar generation. And so I think it's great that we've come of age when we were younger, therapy was still this sort of like,
It was.
and you wouldn't admit that you were in it. It was a bad thing. And, now it's just like a tool in everyone's toolkit. It's great.
Yeah, I think everyone should have a therapist at some point in their life. And I will tell you, there were times I wasn't mature enough where I walked out of therapy sessions because maybe I wasn't able to receive what they were saying. And I've even looked back and went, wow, that therapist was really right. I wonder what would have happened if I would have
Okay, I don't want to create a
stuck with
HIPAA
them.
violation, but if you have any good examples, that would be like...
Oh, I remember. I do. Well, it's my story, so I think I can tell it. I was in therapy. I was maybe in my early 20s, and the therapist said to me that maybe the problem wasn't the people around me; it was my expectation of them, which was
You got to sit on that for a
a
minute.
fair thing to unpack. Unfortunately, when I was 22, my response was "Go F yourself," and I got up and walked out. Which was not
But you remember it still. So.
But you know what? Yeah, like if I could, and what's sad is I don't remember her name because like I wish I could go back and be like, you know what? Like 20 years later, 20, 30 years down the road now, when I think of like that conversation, when I was at a place to receive what she was saying, I really did understand what she was trying to say and was able to make myself better because of it. But at the time I was not open. I did not have an open mindset to receive that input.
It's a good line though. I do like it.
Yeah, it was. She was in a lot of ways she was right. And what I think she was saying wasn't don't hold people accountable.
Yeah.
But what she was saying is like people are going to be people. They're going to things are going to happen. Again, it's you control your life, not everyone else's. And if you spend your life trying to control the good, the bad, the negative, and how other people respond to things, you're never going to be happy. You're going to chase that.
Are you pushing people in the direction you want them to? Or are you leading them to where you want to go?
Yeah, exactly. And if you're pushing them, again, you're never going to be happy in that relationship with them and they're never going to be happy. So, I think there was just, it was it was very powerful what she was trying to teach me, but I wasn't a good student in that moment.
The advice that sent Allie walking out of that therapy session was simple. Stop focusing so much on everyone else and start focusing on yourself. It wasn't easy to hear at the time, but over the years, that idea reshaped how she thinks about career and identity. Allie has built an incredible career, but she believes work can't be the only place you find purpose. And when you build a fuller sense of purpose outside your job, it also opens the door to giving back. That's the perspective Allie now shares with younger professionals who are just starting out.
I think one of the things that I tell them, and it's very important to me, is I always say family, career in that order. Work for a company and work for a boss that understands that. And by the way, family doesn't necessarily have to mean a traditional family, right? You might have a community.
Dog moms?
Dog moms. It could be your church family. Like, there's something that's important to you outside of your career. Make sure that you have an identity outside of your career. I see a lot of individuals that, are older as I'm getting on the other side, of if you read Brooks's book From Strength to Strength, it's like crystallized versus growth intelligence. I'm like, okay, I'm crystallizing a little bit. And that's okay as long as, I balance it with growth mindset people around me. But one of the things that I tell them is create an identity and create purpose outside of who you are as in your career, because you could lose your job tomorrow. You could decide to retire earlier and then what are you going to do? So I think it's just really important to, I say family, career. Again, family can be whatever you need it to be to have community and purpose, but have something outside of career and protect that order.
I've been doing this for 17 years and I've watched so many people just retire without a plan
Yeah.
and compare them against those who do have a plan. And I mean, it's just unbelievable the difference, right? If you have that sense of purpose, what are you going to do in those years? How are you going to contribute? How are you going to feel valuable? Because the next thing you know, you're just sitting around and going, "Hey, boy, there's a lot of people who are active still
Yep.
doing all these other things, and I'm just here retired." I think that's it'd be a tough transition.
I think you're spot on. And the other thing I think is it's very American of us, right? Like
Yeah.
as I've
Get the gold watch.
yeah,
hang
being
it
in
up.
being in a global role, like it's not common in other countries, right? Like if somebody says, "Oh, tell me about you," like we instantly go to our career.
Yeah,
Like this is this
right.
is
Yes.
what
Yeah.
that's not you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's and that's something that I think is very American in a lot of ways, and we don't always respect the older cultures and the wisdom that they bring and those things. So I think it's really important to look, companies are great, but at the end of the day, they're companies and they're running businesses and they're going to make decisions. So it's important not to put 100% of yourself in that bucket. You need to protect a certain portion of yourself. And I say, look, when I say family, like I'm never going to travel on my anniversary or my kids' birthdays. I don't care, like, because that's too important to me to be there. And there's I'm not going to miss those things. And again, work for places that can respect that. And if they don't, then go find somewhere else because there's going to come a day that you're not going to be working there. And you don't want to look back and say, wow, I gave it all for something and have no purpose or got nothing out of it in the future.
Yeah. That's not going to be too many sentences in your obit, right? I know you've talked about resilience being a keystone of your success. How do you get it? Can you build it? Can you develop it? Like,
I think
or is that just
so.
scar tissue that just like comes along?
I definitely think there's a lot of scar tissue there. So I had a lot of opportunities to build it, is what I would say.
But I think like the person who maybe didn't have the unique situation you had or that much adversity, and then they find themselves, stranded or something at a certain point. Like, how do they build, some toughness?
I think therapy is part of it, right? Is learning, is being open with your emotions. I think sometimes in society we're told like, there's like two emotions. You can be happy or sad. And there's a whole gamut. And really understanding the layers down there and what motivates you as an individual. It's really getting to know yourself more than anything and getting to know what you're comfortable with. What are your boundaries in life? What's important to you? What does integrity mean to you? And really understanding those things. And I think then through your experiences, you'll learn, how to make trade-offs when you need to or not make trade-offs. And it'll help you see things as opportunities instead of always obstacles, right? Like I always say I wasn't born knowing the things that I know now. I had to learn them. So, I mean, none of us come out of the womb like, you weren't a rock star executive recruiter, right? Coming out of the womb, you had to learn those things.
Yeah.
So, I think it's a willingness.
First time I've ever been associated with rock stars. So I'll take it.
It's just a willingness to learn, right?
Yeah.
And it's a willingness to say, okay, I won't do that again. And also sometimes a willingness to just fess up when you screwed up.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah,
hey, you
that's
know
a good-
what? I tried something and that wasn't something I'd do again. And I think that's where people go wrong from a resilience perspective.
Mhm.
I think they're unwilling to admit sometimes to themselves that maybe they made a mistake or they did something wrong. So they try to like repaint it into they try to reframe it somehow. I mean, there's a lot of things that I've done, wrong in my life or things that I wouldn't duplicate or things I'm ashamed of, as an older person. But that's how you grow. That's how you learn. That's how you get better.
I know you take that positive energy and gratitude into giving back. So talk a bit about charitable contributions, the way you give back.
When we were part of Honeywell, we couldn't do a lot of philanthropy because Honeywell had its own philanthropy arm and everything, just being part of a big corporation.
Sure.
So now being a smaller, nimble company, it kind of created the opportunity to start doing philanthropy in our company. I'm really focused on kids aging out of foster care. I think for
We've
us
talked about this
in wholesale, there is a huge population of workers. We always talk about, oh, we need workers. We need good people. Where are we going to find them? There is a massive group of young adults that are 18 years old that are aging out of foster care, that are looking for a community, that are looking for purpose, and that are looking for some direction. And I think that we as an industry can really tap into that and give them all of those things. Speaking for myself, while I wasn't a kid that aged out of foster care, there was some very similar, kind of coming here with really nothing and having to establish myself, I found community and distribution. And I think that there's a whole workforce for us out there of future CEOs that are aging out of foster care. So Directions 613 is one I want to give a shout out to. And then also La La Land. They're really cool. They they're in, I think, California, New York, Texas. They're growing. And what they are is they're coffee shops. And they have something called the foundation. So they have their cafes. Through the foundation, they give kids that are aging out of or that are, aging out of foster care, they work at the cafe. So they're teaching them business skills and work skills. And then they also pair them with a mentor every semester. So I highly recommend, if you see a La La Land cafe anywhere around you, going and patronizing them.
La La Land
and the
Cafe?
coffee's pretty
Good
good
shout
too.
out. Nice. All right, we're going to have to talk about taking the foster career, aging out pipeline, taking that national. We're going to have to.
I'm telling you, I firmly believe not just in wholesale distribution, but right, our customers that say we need technicians or we need, think about how could you tap into that talent pool. I'm telling you, there's kids out there that would make phenomenal apprentices in our industries, and I think would really, again, I think they're the next CEOs. The next CEOs are out there, and it's up to us, same thing, to kind of help bring them in and give them an opportunity. I'll be honest, my kids don't want to work in distribution. I get it. They're carving their own path. So I think a lot of us are finding that, it's not our kid. It's not so much the second generation and the third, that maybe it used to be back when there were more family-owned businesses. So I think we have to think differently about where we're going and where we're looking for talent.
Love that you referred to your multi-billion-dollar company as smaller and nimble. That's pretty good.
Compared to the Honeywell days, I joke, there were so many layers. I think they were in space at some point. I think there was an alien ship. There were so many layers compared to now. Divisions
within divisions. That's a.
There is too big sometimes.
Throughout our conversation, Allie kept coming back to these ideas: serving, resilience, and the importance of building a life that extends beyond work. Her perspective was shaped by an early chapter in her life that didn't follow the traditional path. And today, she's using those lessons to help others find their own footing. And now to wrap things up, some rapid-fire questions.
Favorite movie?
One of my favorites that I recently watched, within the last couple of years, was Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah.
It won the Oscar, and I just thought it was amazing. It was one of my favorites. And this past weekend, I watched Hamnet, which is also in the running for Oscar, and for an Oscar this year, and it was amazing. I did not think I was going to enjoy it at all, and I thought it was just fantastic.
Favorite food from your hometown when you grew up?
Ooh, well, I grew up in Philly, so Philadelphia is. I can't pick one. You're going to make me pick one.
I feel like Philly's got a pretty obvious one.
Well, you've got the cheesesteak, of course, right? But an Italian hoagie is just pretty solid. I feel like even more so than a cheesesteak. Yeah,
it's good.
Definitely Italian hoagie. Little oregano, little salt, little pepper, sweet and hot peppers. Definitely.
All right. I have to give that a go. You have a recommendation next time I go to Philadelphia. Best concert you've ever been to?
Ooh, that's a really good one. And I don't want to have recency bias on this, but I might. So over the holiday, what do you buy the man that has everything? So my husband is a huge fan of CCR, Creedence Clearwater Revival. Yeah. And, John Fogerty wouldn't play the songs for a long time because he didn't have the catalog and he had the falling out. And he now plays, he Taylor Swifted the catalog. He re-recorded it and he's playing again. And he's in his 80s. So he plays a couple shows every year in Vegas. And we went out on January 2nd for a date night and we saw John Fogerty play in Vegas. And he was amazing. He had his sons up there. Playing, all the old CCR songs, sounded just as good. He's aged incredibly well musically, and it was just a great, enjoyable concert because he was having fun up there with his family, and the songs are great, and it was a really good show.
All right, a little more serious one. What if you weren't doing this? What would you be doing?
Oh man, well, I joke I'd be a stay-at-home dog mom, but that's probably not realistic because I probably would get bored. But I think I would probably teach supply chain. So I would have had to have been doing this to go there to leverage that experience. But I'd love to, I do guest lectures at TCU a couple times a year, which I always enjoy doing. And, I've done them down at A&M before. So I think I'd love to just kind of teach the next generation of of supply chain leaders, and hopefully they could learn from some of my battle scars.
Do you have dogs? What kind of dogs? And is it enough? If you were your dog mom, would you have a lot more?
There's never enough. So
Okay.
we had 4, one passed away, and we have 3 now. And not only are they dogs, I should preface, they're rescue dogs, which means they come with such a myriad of medical issues and eye drops. And I mean, it's just ridiculous.
I don't know. I think some of
right?
these purebred dogs have got some of their own.
That's fair. So I have 3 now. They're all little dogs. They're all rescues. They're all a nightmare. My husband did say when we had 4 that if I took any more home, that there would be a Facebook listing for a middle-aged woman and 5 dogs in need of a new home. So I think he's capped me out. No more for the time being.
I think I get that.
So he also noted rather correctly that as our kids grew and left for college, I was replacing them with small, high-maintenance dogs.
Mm.
And I tried to tell him that wasn't true. And then he said, well, when Jesse graduated, you got that dog. And then he went through and showed me the evidence. And he may be right. I may be replacing, my children with small dogs that are high maintenance.
Love an example of a husband being right.
Yeah.
By the way. We don't get many of those.
Yeah, we might have to edit that part out so he doesn't hear it.
This has been Ordinary Greatness. Subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. Please feel free to reach out on LinkedIn to let me know what you think of the show. Catch you next time.